Looks like we're live, Caitlin. Good evening, everybody. I'm Brendan Baylott. I'm the administrator of the Great Lakes Shipwreck Research Group, and I'm also the president of the Wisconsin Underwater Archaeology Association. And we are hosting the Go Ships Festival 2024 in Manitowoc at the Inn on Maritime Bay. Those of you who've been watching know that we have been hosting podcasts every week of our different presenters. Last week we had Kendra Kennedy from the State Historical Society's Maritime Archaeology program. Today we have another real maritime archaeologist, not a navigationalist like me, but somebody who went to college and does it professionally for a living. Caitlin Zant. Caitlin is let me get this right, the research coordinator and underwater archaeologist with the Wisconsin Shipwreck Coast National Marine Sanctuary here in Wisconsin. Welcome, Caitlin.
Thanks for having me, Brendan. This is great. Happy to be here.
We're really glad to have you at Go Ships this year. Part of the reason we decided to reboot the Go Ships Festival in the first place was the Wisconsin Shipwreck Coast National Marine Sanctuary. It's a federal NOAA National Marine Sanctuary that's been declared here in Wisconsin and is now in full swing. And we figured what a better place to restart the Go Ships Festival than right in the sanctuary, in the heart of the sanctuary at Manitowoc, to highlight some of these amazing shipwrecks we've got. So I'm very excited about that and very excited to have you with us. So Caitlin, usual question I ask everybody, who, especially professionals, how'd you get interested in this? It's sort of not a normal career.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's a good question. So I, in college growing up, I was always really interested in maritime history. I didn't really ever know that it was something that you could study as a full-time career. So I was just always kind of interested in it as a, just a side hobby. And growing up vacationing along the Great Lakes, I, went to a lot of lighthouses and knew about the Edmund Fitzgerald and all those things. But I also kind of as a kid was one of those kids that was really obsessed with like the Titanic, not the movie, but the ship. And so I, always loved that growing up. But I, again, never knew that was something I could do. So I studied history and geography when I was in college, and kind of in a moment of not knowing what I was going to do after graduation, which everybody I think can relate to. I started looking at graduate programs and kind of had learned a little bit more about maritime history as a field of study. And so I kind of stumbled upon maritime archaeology as a field. And so I started looking at graduate programs and kind of quite literally did a Google search and came across the program in maritime studies at East Carolina University. And so I went, kind of started looking into it, and it was, a program within the history department. And I figured out with a history degree, that would be something really cool. And the rest is kind of history. I got really excited about the program, ended up going to East Carolina down in Greenville, North Carolina. And then by kind of happenstance, came back to Wisconsin doing my master's thesis on the wreck of the Adriatic up in Sturgeon Bay.
Very neat. The Adriatic is quite a wreck. And of course, they have that wonderful new display about the Adriatic with its self-unloading material at the Wisconsin Maritime Museum. And I know your work was instrumental in that display.
Everybody in grad school kind of jokes that nobody's ever going to read your thesis, so it doesn't really matter. That wasn't necessarily the case for mine, but it was great to see that kind of come to fruition after 10 years of work by the Maritime Museum and a lot of different partners.
So that's a good segue into my next question for you, Caitlin. What is the most interesting shipwreck you've worked on here?
That's a great question. And I feel like I should say something within the sanctuary because it's in the sanctuary. So my sanctuary answer is the LaSalle shipwreck, which is a sailing canaler that wrecked on Raleigh Point, and it's only in about 15 feet of water. But what's really unique about Raleigh Point is that it has what historic reports called quicksand. And basically, it's this really gelatinous kind of sediment that is in the bay, and so, or on the point. And so when ships happen to wreck on the point, they get stuck and they basically cannot, they're suctioned in, so they can't be pulled out. This wreck that you're seeing here is actually one of those. It's not LaSalle, it's the Major Anderson. But similarly, these wrecks get kind of sucked in there, and then the sand covers them very quickly. And so you have a wreck that's remarkably intact, or you have multiple wrecks that are remarkably intact all the way up to their bulwarks in a lot of cases, and all the way up to like the railing essentially, in 15 feet of water or less. And that's kind of unheard of in a lot of different places, because a lot of times when wrecks wreck on shore, they break apart, and you just find bits and pieces of them, which also happens in this area. But what's really unique is that you get this wide swath of shipwrecks that are very intact and very close to the surface. And so you don't even necessarily have to be a diver. LaSalle was found by a local powered parachute or ultralight pilot, Susie Johnson, at one of many wrecks that she found on Raleigh Point. And so you can see them from above the surface of the water. You can see them from the surface of the water. And so they're really great sites for people who are kayakers, canoers, paddleboarders, and divers to go and visit. And so LaSalle is probably one of my favorites when it comes to that. If I'm going to do a quick non-sanctuary wreck, I would say I have to say the Milwaukee Car Ferry. That was one of my very first projects when I came to work here in Wisconsin, and it's just it's a remarkable wreck to kind of take a look at and see. But yeah.
Yeah, the wrecks there at Raleigh's Point are really, really something. A lot of people don't realize that some of the best preserved wrecks on the Great Lakes are those that are buried in sand, and some of the most archaeologically important. I've probably been involved in half a dozen wrecks that became uncovered as a result of storms, and the whole hull was just filled with artifacts. And of course, luckily, they recovered again, and so they're still preserved. But yeah, really, really interesting, excellent wrecks that a lot of divers don't think about, because just because they're buried doesn't mean they're not historically really important.
Yep. And depending on water level changes, they become covered or uncovered, as the years change. And so, just because it's covered one year doesn't mean it won't be uncovered the next.
So Caitlin, I mean, for years you worked for the State Historical Society's Maritime Archaeology program with Tammy Thompson, our state underwater archaeologist. But it's only been recently that you have moved to be the archaeologist and research coordinator at our new National Marine Sanctuary. That's got to be like a dream job. What is the coolest thing for you about being there on the staff of the new National Marine Sanctuary?
Yeah. So it's there's a lot that's really cool about it. And one of the things that was has been really great is that I did spend 8.5 years working with the state. And so the resources I've been working with for a really long time, and all of the work over the past 30 years that the state has done to record these wrecks has really been a really awesome foundation for us to kind of jump forward in. And so with the sanctuary only now being just over 2 years old, there's a lot of information and a lot of research that we can do, because we don't have to start from scratch, because a lot of that was previously done by the state and past maritime archaeologists in the state. And so what's been really great is being able to build on that and kind of reach into new areas of research, essentially. So, kind of going beyond and talking with, people who are studying soil, or people who are studying like sediment movement in the Great Lakes, or people who are talking about, different invasive species growth or death in the Great Lakes. And so it's just basically it's another step beyond the work that I'd been able to work with previously, in terms of just kind of broadening that research and kind of having different partnerships with scientists from all across the Great Lakes, all across the nation, to be able to come and do research here and really bring that. One of the coolest things for me, at least, is to be able to talk to these partners and then bring that research here to Wisconsin, where, but maybe before they didn't know about shipwrecks in Wisconsin, or they didn't, know that there were shallow water wrecks on Raleigh Point that could be researched and look at, that might be a good, connection to some other shallow water location that they're looking at. So, kind of being able to springboard into that, and then also just be able to be around and be a part of a brand new National Marine Sanctuary as it's growing, has been something that's been really, really neat to see, and kind of, working with all of our, state and local partners to really figure out what we want the Wisconsin Shipwreck Coast National Marine Sanctuary to look like, and broaden it and expand it, and kind of see what research we can do, and kind of how we can help move everything forward when it comes to Great Lakes maritime heritage research.
Yeah, it is really a treasure to have that sanctuary. When like you were saying, there's so many different facets to it. When Dusty Cliffman and I were out looking for a shipwreck, we found all these craters on the bottom of the lake in 500 feet of water. We wouldn't have known where to go. We came to the sanctuary and were referred to the Great Lakes Environmental Research Lab, and it turns out there were a pretty significant find. And having that sanctuary there with all those multidisciplinary science facets really helped us focus on that. So I'm really excited about all the different, not necessarily shipwreck oriented possibilities for the sanctuary.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
So in full disclosure, I am on the advisory council of the National Marine Sanctuary, and Caitlin is on the board of the WUAA. So we're kind of one big happy family, and for the most part. But one of the things that I get a lot of questions about, being on the Sanctuary Advisory Council, and I know a lot of people are interested in, is the fact that the sanctuary has been mapped now with multi-beam sonar. And I get asked, did you guys find any new shipwrecks? And, and I'll be honest with you, they haven't disclosed to the Sanctuary Advisory Council all sorts of gory details about shipwrecks. But suffice it to say, we do know that new shipwrecks have been found. Caitlin, can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. And in my talk at Ghost Ships, I'll talk a little bit more about a lot of this, but, yeah, so during the survey, a lot of different, again, like you said, not just shipwrecks, but a lot of very, interesting, like geological features were also found on the bottom of the lake. And so, kind of the process of this as it goes is the Office of the Coast Survey kind of does this research, and then they submit all of that data to the state, and the state reviews it as well. And so the state, was given these all of this data, and then after a little bit, we were also given some access to the data. So the state is currently working on. They were able to kind of drop in on a lot of sites that were located that were potentially shipwreck-esque, I will say, in the sanctuary. And so they've been doing a lot of work over the past, the past season, trying to, take a look at those, identify some of those, and get that information out there, including if, estimating if the shipwrecks are eligible for listing on the National Register, and everything like that. So officially, that information is to come. More of that research is to come. But there have definitely been some, interesting bits and pieces that we've found that, we didn't really realize were there, that aren't necessarily historic shipwrecks, but are still some really cool sites. So one in particular is a site we just started calling the Manitowoc Crane. When we found it, or when we saw it, we thought it was going to be this really cool ship with, all this awesome stuff. And it turns out it's a fantastic site, but it is a crane off of Raleigh Point in deeper water that appears to be quite modern. So there's a front end loader, there's an actual crane. So basically, if you've been in any port along the Great Lakes and you've seen the barge filled with rocks and the crane on it, that then they're like repairing breakwaters or what have you, that's essentially what we have, just in 120 some odd feet of water. And so what we've kind of pieced out is that slid off of a barge at some point in time. And kind of it's been interesting to kind of follow that to try to bring that story up. So there's some lines on it, like people have dove this wreck before, and talking to a lot of divers who have been active for many, many years, they all know the site. It's just one of those it's known, but kind of forgotten. And so it's, one of those sites that's really cool. And so we're hoping to kind of, introduce people to it again and kind of learn the story of it as we can. It's like kind of maybe through oral history of more recent history. But so that's something that was cool that we didn't know was there. And so just kind of as that unfolded was really cool. And then on top of that, just what Brendan mentioned before, what you mentioned with the those kind of sinkholes or odd circular shapes in deep water. So that's something that, again, I'll talk a little bit more about in our talk, but we're hopeful as we move forward that we'll be able to, work with partners to bring grants here so that we're able to not only study the shipwrecks that we have in deep water, but also to study these kind of anomalies that we didn't really know were there before, and learn a little bit more about them and try to understand what the bottom structure of Lake Michigan looks like. And again, through working with some other partners, we hope that the collection of this data, again, not just for shipwrecks, but for all of this bottom data that we have of Lake Michigan now. There's so many different avenues that we can go with research, which is awesome. We have all the shipwreck data, which is great, but then at the same time, we now have this really great information about what the bottom of Lake Michigan actually looks like. So
very cool, Caitlin. Well, I really am looking forward to your talk at Ghost Ships. There's really a lot of cool opportunities and possibilities for the sanctuary. Plus, there are going to be some new wrecks. One of the things I like is that the sanctuary is going to be transparent about this, and as we're able to release information about these new sites, they will be made public, and and if they're in diveable depths, when appropriate, divers can visit them. That's one of the main purposes of the sanctuary. So I'm very excited about your talk, and I really appreciate you coming on and doing this podcast with us.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me. I'm very happy to be here, and I hope we see everybody at Ghost Ships Festival.
Excellent. Yeah. Make sure to get your tickets, guys. www.ghostshipsfestival.com. Our booths are just about sold out. We still have some sponsorship opportunities. You can pre-register on our website for your tickets. $20 a piece, $25 at the door if you don't pre-register, and young people under 18 get to come in for free. So we're going to have virtual reality headsets there to give 3D virtual reality tours of shipwrecks. So it'll be a cool thing to bring young people to as well. So Caitlin, thanks again, and thank you everybody for joining us. Tune in next week when we will have another presenter sneak peek. Good night, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.